Jacob was surprised when he opened the door to his hotel room and found Sophie standing outside. She asked him if he'd like to go and eat. Though they had spent a lot of time together, he didn't think Sophie was all that interested in him. But maybe she was trying. He turned around and picked up his keycard and said, "Let's go." Sophie secretly felt relieved, as she was totally expecting Jacob to say no. She had already asked too much of him during the hike. She almost went out by herself, but being a stranger to this place, she would hate to eat out alone. If only her parents were around, or her stomach was not violently voicing its dissatisfaction, she would not have come to ask out Jacob. The two walked out of the hotel and began looking for restaurants. It was already past 9, and they had to find something before it was 10 o'clock at night. Most of the restaurants had already closed. Not knowing where to look, they searched somewhat aimlessly in the areas close to the hotel. The hunt for the restaurant made them hungrier. Afraid that she might get lost, Sophie made sure to stay close to Jacob. Walking along a somewhat desolate street, they finally spotted a small restaurant ahead of them that was still open. They rushed into the restaurant and were about to place an order for 2 plates of food when they realized that there were a few shady guys sitting inside with a muscular build. One was bald, one had a mohawk, and the other had a long, shabby head of hair. Their clothes were either old or messy, or they were shirtless altogether. They seemed to have been drinking for hours and were cursing a lot while talking to each other. Sophie was scared and wanted to drag Jacob out of the restaurant. Jacob, on the other hand, gently grabbed her hand and comforted her by saying, "It's okay." He was starving and knew Sophie was too, and they had no energy to look for any other restaurants. Besides, it was impossible to find another restaurant that was open at this hour. He led Sophie to a corner table, and they both sat down. He then said to the owner, who had come up to greet them, 2 meatloafs, gravy, peas, mashed potatoes, and some fried chicken, please." He ordered on Sophie's behalf as well, because the restaurant didn't have much to offer. Besides, he didn't want them to stay there for too long. Sophie was terrified and was constantly observing the dangerous men around them and was too preoccupied to object to Jacob. "The cards are not in your favor tonight, buddy. All your money is mine." "You're such a sloppy drunk. You're spilling ketchup all over me." "Deal again. You're cheating." The men at the other tables were drinking as well as they played poker and blackjack. The more they drank, the more their voices grew louder. Sophie thought for a moment and decided to move from the seat across from Jacob to the one beside him. Her alarmed and panicky look made him reach out and hold her hand. She seemed to feel much better after that and became slightly comfortable. Soon, the piping hot chicken and meatloaf was served. They hungrily devoured the food without caring where to start and where to end the meal. They were famished. Their dinner etiquette was so synchronized that they appeared like a compatible couple to the onlookers. After dinner, the two felt that their stomachs had been filled with warmth. Sophie refused to stay in the restaurant for any longer and asked Jacob to pay the bill, and they got out of there immediately. The little town at the foot of the mountain was incredibly quiet. As they walked, the moon was shining gently on both of them, projecting their shadows on the smooth concrete path. One was tall and the other was short. Observing that their shadows were touching each other, Sophie suddenly realized that she was walking too close to Jacob and stepped away. Out of nowhere, a wildcat appeared and caused Sophie to jump up and move closer to Jacob again. Facing her, Jacob once again gave her his hand to hold. Sophie looked at him and paused for a few seconds. "Just for a little while," she said, and placed her hand into Jacob's palm. As she gave her hand to hold, she no longer felt anxious and uneasy. Instead, she felt calm. Nothing was scaring her anymore, and she was walking pretty happily with Jacob holding her hand. Jacob was quiet during the walk. He focused on leading her back to the hotel safely by following the same path they had taken during their restaurant hunt. A peaceful small town, a serene mountain range, light breathing, gentle footsteps, and the slight warmth of the hand. It was all so tranquil for Sophie. She had never felt this way before. felt good. She felt like she belonged. She felt protected. After walking for about 15 minutes, they arrived at the parking lot in front of the hotel. Jacob let go of Sophie's hand. Sophie realized that she had been enjoying the walk and found herself slightly disappointed that it was over. Her face had turned bright red as she somehow found herself listless and extremely tired. Abruptly, she went into the hotel looking somewhat confused. Jacob had no clue what was going on in her head. All he knew was that Sophie was pretty tired from the day and shook up because of the rowdy crowd at dinner. Following her, Jacob walked into the hotel and returned to his room. To his surprise, he discovered that Drakon wasn't back. Sophie's parents must be busy catching up with their friends and lost track of time, he thought. He lay down on the bed and opened Sophie's pink backpack. He took out the camera and found that they had only taken 2 photos with it the entire day. He looked at the photo where Sophie was sitting on the boulder and looking up angrily with her cheeks puffed up. She looks like a tomato when she's angry. Jacob shook his head and laughed as he put away the camera. After he finished taking a hot shower, he realized that Drakon had come back. Drakon briefly inquired about their day on the mountain, and Jacob also replied in a nutshell. Without any further questioning, Drakon nodded, acknowledging his response, and went for a shower. Feeling nervous and awkward, Jacob got into bed. He was guessing that in the room across from theirs, Helen must be asking Sophie about their day as well. It had been a scary and thrilling day. Nevertheless, he had successfully brought Sophie down without anyone getting hurt. Tired and exhausted, Jacob quickly fell asleep before Drakon could even come out of the bathroom. When he woke up the next day, Jacob found Drakon sitting on the sofa watching TV. "Were you exhausted yesterday?" Drakon asked as he saw that Jacob had woken up. "A little bit," Jacob answered. "We are going to eat at a homestay nearby in a bit. Afterward, we will be heading home," Drakon told him. "Okay," Jacob nodded his head. He thought for a second and spoke again. "Thank you for bringing me along. It meant a lot to me." "We were happy to do that. Now, go, freshen up." Drakon walked over to the window and opened the curtains. It was drizzling outside, and it seemed to be a foggy day. The mountain view was hazy but splendid. A cold breeze came in through the window and made the room temperature seem colder. It was way cooler than yesterday, but it was refreshing. Jacob put on his shirt and went over to the bathroom to freshen up. When he was ready, he followed Drakon out, and they went to knock on the door across from theirs. When the door opened, Helen appeared, and Sophie was followed closely behind her mother. Sophie was wearing a milky white t-shirt with a pair of purple joggers. It looked good on her. Jacob couldn't help but admire her beauty. Both mother and daughter were each wearing a straw hat. The coffee-colored, broad-brimmed straw hat perfectly matched the dark and light patches on Helen's floral dress, accentuating her elegance. Oddly enough, the straw hat seemed a little out of place with the rest of Sophie's ensemble, but she looked cute. "Let's go." Helen tenderly held onto Sophie's hand as she gave her keycard to Drakon. Drakon led Jacob, and the 4 of them walked towards the hotel reception. Walking through the winding corridor of the hotel, Jacob saw Wildcat Mountain. Showered with drizzling rain and mist, it looked like an impressionistic landscape painting. As the weekend came to an end, Jacob genuinely felt like he was a part of the Dragon family.
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.